All right. A friend of mine requested that I do kind of a more of a deep dive into this Seismic Bass Amp plugin. He wanted to see a little bit more of just, dialing a tone or whatever. And it's like, that's a good point. I wasn't really sure if anybody would really want to see that. Generally, my, perspective is like, I'm not trying to bore people or whatever, but I guess some people are kind of interested in that. So I just decided to do a different video. I don't really want to mix that stuff together. There's like demo videos and then show you how I do it kind of video. And this is going to be more of a show you how I do it kind of video. And this is, I'm going to be using Seismic for this. So this might be, more beneficial if you're using this plugin, but I'm going to be going over some pretty basic principles as far as dialing a bass tone in. And this plugin just makes what I do normally, it just makes it a lot easier in way less steps. So I'm going to use this because I don't really see a reason why I would use something else going forward. So I forgot to mention this in my demo video, but I used the default preset on Seismic for that demo. And the guitars were the default preset for Clairvoyant, which is another Modern Metal Songwriter plugin. So yeah, that demo, that's just a default preset. So sorry, I forgot to mention that. That was part of why I didn't show dialing in a tone, because I did not dial in a tone for that. Here we go. Hi, this is the editor. I just wanted to make a quick note here and let you know that this is a long, unscripted video delivered in a conversational tone. It's meant for relative newcomers who are looking to learn a little bit more about crafting their own bass tones in a rock or a metal production. This video goes deep into concepts, reasons, and examples rather than showing quick, clickbaity shortcuts meant merely to grow a channel. It gets pretty detailed and was not edited for retention or channel growth, but to provide value for those who are looking for this sort of information. I'm hoping to provide a real shortcut to increased capabilities rather than a shortcut to an end result that only helps someone one time. I've included chapters to make it easier to skip around and watch this video in sections at your leisure. The algorithm won't reward me for making content like this, but if you find it helpful, please do all of that YouTube stuff and maybe send a link to a friend who may also find this useful. Okay, back to the video. So I've got some notes here. You can probably just pause the video and read, and then you won't have to watch the rest of the video. But if you're like most other people, you'd probably just rather watch the video. So here we go. Step number 1, don't use a live bass. If you're dialing a tone and you're like actually playing it, and then you're like, tweaking stuff and then playing it and tweaking stuff. The sound of the bass in the room is going to make you think that it's brighter than it really is. So it's just counterintuitive as fuck to do that. Even if you have headphones on, you can kind of like feel like the clank and everything if you're playing the bass, or if you've got a friend playing the bass. The easiest way to get that out of the equation is to just record the bass and then, use that DI to fuck with your tones. So that's what we have here. I'm going to show you real quickly. I'll bypass the plugin and then just show you the routing just so you know that this is just a DI. I mean, it's printed, but you'll have to trust me. It's just that bass there. It's slightly modified, but I mean, it's nothing special. It's not like, some crazy expensive bass. It was like a $700 bass or something like that. And I just did some very, very modest upgrades to it. So that's that. That is the bass signal. That's on this track. That's going straight to the main out. Here, I'm just going to turn off everything. And you might be like, dude, what the fuck? Get to the point. Show me some fucking knob twiddling. And I'm like, dude, we can't get ahead of ourselves because all of this stuff is so important. And there's like an epidemic on the internet of just people thinking that tone is like, you got to buy a thing and then you got to know how to tweak those fucking knobs and you're going to get some awesome tone. That's never been the case, and it never will be the case. There's MIDI bass. Like if you're looking for a shortcut, it's probably going to be MIDI bass. But even then, you gotta work really hard to get that to sound real. So that's like a different kind of work. But if you're trying to avoid just really tedious recording, I am sorry to disappoint you. Unless you're really fucking good and you can nail your takes, most of your tone is going to come from your hands. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, I'm so tired of that old trope or whatever. But it's like, sorry to fucking burst your bubble, man. But if you look at like the top producers, they're not doing like special things really, or using crazy fucking gear. They're using the same stuff everybody else has, but they've got a very meticulous attention to detail, and they're patient, and they will just keep redoing things like, nope, not good enough. Nope, not good enough. Nope, not good enough. Nope. Take 473. Cool. Let's take that one. Now let's move forward. That's pretty much the secret, but obviously that's not going to work in this video. So we're gonna keep on going. That's the main point, is getting everything to that threshold of like, cool, I've got a solid DI. Now I can fuck with the tone. But you can't, if you've got just a shitty performance, man, good luck. You're not going to get very far. So you're like, all right, so what the fuck is a good DI? Like, how do I know if it's good enough? All right, so tuning, this is the biggest thing. If you want your mix to sound amateur, don't pay attention to tuning. Just skip over this part. But if you want your mix to sound, professional or whatever, this is kind of where it starts. If you're tuning your bass, kind of like the kid at Guitar Center. And then you're like, all right, I'm ready. And then you start playing like this. You can see the problem. We're going sharp every time. So what do we do about that? We tune it to how we're playing it. So we got to find how hard we're going to be hitting the string. And this is where I wish every tuner was the Kemper tuner. But, this is probably the second. This is the best software tuner I've found so far. So it's tricky. It's not going to get dead on, but this is part of the game, I guess. And then if you try to tune it like how you would normally tune it, like if you're a kid at Guitar Center or whatever, yeah, it's flat. But don't touch it, because you're not playing the part like that, right? If you've got a part later in the song where you just have a long sustaining note, then you're going to tune it the old-fashioned way. But if you want your bass to actually be in tune on the song that you're getting ready to record, you need to tune it properly. And the bigger, thicker, and lower, or not thicker, but the lower you're tuned, the more of this like pitch wobble is going to be a thing. Like how it starts sharp and then drops. So that's the very first thing. You got to tune for the part that you're going to play. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of problems. So there's a lot of like purists out there who will they'll kind of just say I'm crazy because like, just don't pick so hard. You're ruining the tone. For me, that's the sound that I want. I'm going to go after the sound, and then I'm going to tune the bass to be in tune when it's making the sound that I want, because it's a fucking instrument. I'm trying to make a sound with it, right? The sound itself is more important to me than like some sort of, unwritten rule somewhere. And like the fret buzz, I like some fret buzz. Like I want that. Some people are going to be like, dude, that ruins the tone. That's fine. You can use a synth bass or whatever at that point, but that's what I want. I want it to sound like a real bass, fucking kind of dirty, grindy, a little bit of buzz. I want all of that stuff. So I'm going to play it to, get that out of it. And it's totally up to you. If you're more of a, just mellow, whatever, it's up to you. It's totally your thing, but this is my video. I'm going to show you how I do it. So I tune accordioningly, but then we also have this extra problem. So we're slapping on this motherfucking string, right? And that string's just, you've played a bass, I'm sure. If you're watching this video this far into it, you've probably played a bass. People don't really understand that, like, playing a guitar, it's like driving a sports car, you know what I mean? Like 8 strings, they can get a little bit more unwieldy, but generally when you're comparing a guitar to a bass, a guitar is like just, like a fun little sporty car that you're driving around. And then you try to play like equivalent riffs on a bass, and it's like you're trying to, take corners on a racetrack in a big rig or something, but like at actual speed. So you can imagine it's a little bit trickier. And one of the things that make it a little bit tough is when you got this big old floppy string, just it will, the sound will change from hit to hit based on where the string is in its like vibration cycle, and where your pick or finger, however the fuck you're playing it, how that actually strikes the string, like where it is on its vibration. So like sometimes, like if we're tuning, you'll see some notes that just jump way higher than some of the other notes. And I don't know this is just my own theory. I think this is why this happens. See, now I'm woo. Oh, is it freaking out? But you can see sometimes it'll jump up, and it's not just the tuner. It'll happen on the Kemper as well. And the Kemper, that's like the best tuner of all time, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, we've got all that tuning stuff going on. And then you've got your pick. I'm going to call it pick attack because I play with a pick normally. That's my preference. You might play with your fingers, but please, for the love of dogs, don't just play with your fingers because like that's the way it's supposed to be done. Like if you're not ready for that, don't do it. Just use a pick, because one of the things that we're after with a bass tone is consistency, and it is much harder to play consistently with your fingers. A lot of bass players are like me, where it's like you're a guitar player, but you need a bass and you don't really want to go down that MIDI bass route. So you buy a bass and you play it like a guitar. Don't just buy a bass and think like, oh, I'm going to play with my fingers because it's a bass. There is a definite skill involved in that. It's like another type of instrument. You need to get really good with your fingers if you're going to be doing that. And I'm not saying like practice for a few weeks. It's usually like a few years. Some people can do it, and some people they're just all over the place. Okay, so going back to the pick attack, the position of where you play is going to make a huge difference in the tone. Probably be doing this standing up. So just by changing your position, and depending on if you're using a pick, the thickness of your pick, how hard you're playing, that's all going to kind of determine like the sweet spot. You want to kind of find a sweet spot on your bass, and each string is going to kind of be a little bit different. So it's a lot of experimentation. Man, and you're probably like, can we get to the knob diddling? And I'm like, dude, we're getting there, but we have to start from the foundation, because I don't want you to I don't want to mislead anybody. So, we're doing a bass tone video. We're getting it all, broski. Okay, and then the other part about the performance is just how well you mute the other strings. Generally, a bass is intended to be a monophonic instrument, meaning one note at a time. Obviously, you can play chords if you want. That's in that little demo thing. But generally, if you're just like laying down the fucking bottom end, you want to be very careful to play only the note that you intend to play. It might sound like I'm just overthinking things, but this is kind of the difference. Like people will, try to get a certain sound just out of the gear, but you have to start with the performance. And that's what people mean when they say the tone is in the hands. It's not like it's changing the fucking EQ curve or anything like that. It's the foundation for everything that comes afterwards. So by being kind of unintentional and not really defining each note, it can really just kind of blur things together. Like if you've got another string that's just kind of, it's not even ringing clear, but it's kind of just muddying up the signal, that's going to fuck with your tone a lot. Here's a quick example of an unclean note transition. Do you hear that? They both kind of rang at the same time for a split second. But then if you're a little bit more intentional, stuff like that. I'm sorry you can't see my bass. I need more cameras, but I only have that old one, so. Okay, so you have all of these different little factors that go into your bass performance, where if you're just not diligent about getting those things right in the recording, you're going to struggle with everything that comes afterwards. So this is why MIDI bass is kind of popular right now, because you can like save a shit ton of time, especially if the bass isn't really prominent. Like if you're just like a guitar dude and you just want your mix thicker, you just throw some MIDI bass on there. You're just using the bottom end of the bass, and that's much easier because you don't have to worry about tuning or playing clean, because you program it however you want it. So that is an option. Okay, another factor is your bass itself. I feel like every bass kind of has like its own character. This is my Fender Mexa Jazz. It's like a $700 bass, $800, something like that. I made a few upgrades. I put in these EMGs. I don't remember the model, but I think they only have one, jazz set for 5-string basses. I could be wrong, but I'll try to get the name and I'll put that on the screen somewhere. So yeah, I replaced the electronics. That had a fairly substantial change, but I mean, it's nothing fancy. It's just EMGs, Sorry for the reflection here. I changed the bridge out and I moved it back a little bit to make it easier to intonate, but that's not really changing much. And then I added these string trees here to get extra pressure over the nut, which helps with the sustain a little bit. But that's it. It's a totally basic bass. It isn't, it's not like a ding wall or anything super crazy. Yeah, I love the sound of the Fender Jazz. That's why I bought it. This is just like the epitome of like what a bass guitar is supposed to sound like. And this is what it sounds like by itself with no processing whatsoever. All of the knobs are just cranked. So both volumes all the way up and the tone is all the way up. Real quick, I just want to show you these plugins in case anybody's like, well, you got something else on. This is just, I record my guitars and bass on stereo tracks because generally I'm usually using a Kemper on the way in. So I put the Kemper on one side and the DI on the other. In this case, I did not use the Kemper. It's just the DI on the right side. And this plugin just, it lets me choose between left and right side. So I can switch between the DI and the amp tone. And right here, it's on the DI side. If I disengage this, it'll throw the DI to the right. So that's all that's doing. And then this is just a tuner. I can turn that off. So that's it. All we have is Seismic Bass going to the main out here. Oh, wait, let me show you the channel settings. I bypassed the EQ. Nothing's on the channel strip. And then going to the main out, no inserts on the main out. This is feeding my sub pack, which it's not on right now. And then you are hearing the audio coming through this OBS feed. Even though I'm not using OBS, I'm using ScreenFlow, but whatever, who gives a fuck? That's it. This is just the naked DI. That's just that bass there played not as cleanly as it could have been, but clean enough. So basically, with the performance, everything's all about consistency. As far as dynamics, I'm trying to get it as consistently as I can. For one, that helps with the tuning because, as you saw, that pitch drift, that happens with every note. So I'm trying to like keep hitting the same pitch every time. So that is a big part of the consistency. Is just, it's not all about just the dynamics and keeping it consistent there, although that is a major factor. It's also keeping that pitch, like when I'm going sharp with every hit, like it's just going to happen when you're tuned that low. I want it to hit a certain note. So I'm basically, and I'm trying to bring it up, hit that fucking note consistently. If I'm all over the place, I'm going to be and it's just, that's going to affect the fucking tone. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody's just trying to just do everything with the gear. That's why people struggle is because there's like this myth where it's like, just buy this thing and then problem solved. No, that's the problems are solved like as you're recording, and then you take that recording and you kind of massage it a bit, and that's like, you know, the secret. But people like shortcuts, so and this is about as close to a fucking shortcut as you're gonna get as far as bass goes, as far as I'm concerned, because this replaced a lot of plugins for me. All right, so another thing that I want to go over real quick. If we're trying to create a bass tone, how do we know what's good? Like, we want a good tone, right? But what does that mean? If we have a shit ton of experience, we've got kind of an internal thing like, oh, I could just start twiddling some knobs and I'll get somewhere close, you know, somewhere in the ballpark. But what does it mean if you don't have that experience yet? You know, like, what are you fucking shooting for? That's where references come in, broski. So this is probably one of my favorite plugins of all time. There are other ones that do kind of the same thing. This is called Metric AB, and it's just basically, it's made to make referencing a lot easier. I'm going to make a video about this plugin specifically at some point, because I think this is like, this will have a bigger impact on your mixes than probably any other single plugin. But just basically, to show you what it is, it just goes back and forth between any audio file that you load in here. So you just, you know, get MP3s or whatever. It doesn't have to be like a super high quality mix file or anything. MP3s will work because you're just trying to get like the basic overall like tonal and loudness, you know, kind of get the overall picture of all these different mixes. And then you can instantly switch between that and your mix. Right now, all of these mixes are going to be way louder than what I've got going on because I bypassed all of my mastering stuff. But it's got a built-in level match thing. I'm just going to go... Let's go with this. Here's a classic song by Sixth, Sanguine Seas of Bigotry. I'm just going to give you a little tiny blast of it. Never mind. Oh, it's because we have this off. All right, here we go. Here we go. And demonetized. Jokes on YouTube. I'm not even monetized. Haha. All my videos are not monetized. We have that's just going to be I love that bass tone. I think that's fingerstyle, so I'm not going to get too close. It's different bass, all that kind of stuff. But that gives me like a real world target. Like, okay, that's what a good bass sounds like. And I can instantly switch between that and my mix. Obviously, our stuff's quieter, but then we've got this gain match or loudness match button. Check this out. So, man, we're not doing too bad. All right, so you might be like, oh man, that's like nowhere even close. And that's totally fine. I'm not trying to actually copy the actual bass tone itself. I'm just using this as a point of reference so that I make sure that I don't end up like way too bassy or, you know, too thin, that sort of thing. And that's all we're doing here. I'm going to shrink this, and now I can always go back to that. So that's our benchmark. A bass serves multiple purposes in a mix. We've got like the actual job that it's designed to do is to basically provide a foundation for everything else. So that's kind of non-negotiable. No matter what kind of tone you're going for, it needs to at least do its job, you know, and provide like a nice solid foundation for all of the other instruments, at least in my opinion. That's kind of rule number one. Like, you can do whatever the fuck you want with the top end, but the bottom end needs to be solid. And that's kind of the purpose of splitting everything up into multiple bands like this. And Seismic actually gives you 3, so you can have like the bottom end, get that all solid how you want it, lock that in, and then you've got the mid-range and top end where you can kind of get creative, a little bit more creative and stuff. One thing that you will run into sometimes is Noodly bass players that are trying to play guitar parts because they're trying to, it's like an ego thing or something. I think those parts can be tricky because there's just not very much low end, if on those higher notes, higher up on the fretboard, you're going to lose a lot of bottom end. So if you're trying to get like a big beefy bottom end and you've just got like a really noodly bass player, it's going to be a lot trickier than if you've got somebody who is like purposely trying to make everything heavy. So it depends on what kind of bass lines you have. If you have a bassist's kind of bass performance, might be a little bit tricky. If you've got, someone that's like serving the song, you'll have a much easier time. Nothing against, really good bassists that can play all that cool stuff. But if they're two different things. If you're like, I want a really sick noodly bass tone, that's going to be a little bit different than I want a super huge, massive bottom end to my mix. Those are completely different approaches as far as playing and composition and all that stuff. So a kind of a secret with bass tone, like you'll hear a lot of people be like, oh, it's just bass, you won't hear it anyway. They're pretty much talking about just this top end thing. Like even on And Justice for All, you can fucking hear the bass, dude. You can hear it. It's just like, it's kind of tucked and it's kind of providing just the foundation, or it's basically like, the bare minimum of the bassist's role is just kind of thickening things up a little bit. And that's why that bottom end is non-negotiable. You can have a mid-range and top end that are completely buried, and you can still, kind of get away with a good mix as long as you've got other instruments to fill up that space. But generally, that's what people mean when it's like, I can't hear the bass. They're usually talking about the mid-range and or top end. Unless, if it's completely undermixed, then you've got all kinds of other problems. Okay, so for the bass tone, we're going to prioritize the bottom end. We want to get that solid and we want that foundation, because when we're switching back and forth between my DI and this sixth thing, I mean, it's a little bit tricky because it's a lot easier to hear my bass in the way that this rough mix is thrown together. Theirs is a little bit more tucked, but I can already hear that their bass, like the bottom end, is way more like solid compared to mine. If you listen to just the bottom end, you can kind of hear on my DI, it's kind of, fluctuating note to note a little bit. It's doing this a little bit. Actually, let's make that a little bit easier. I'm going to put a low pass. And you kind of see it too. It's not super solid. And then compared to sixth, you probably won't hear this if you're like on small speakers or something, but the sub, it's just a thick, solid, like it just feels like concrete. That's what I want. That's what I want in my mix. Like if I'm listening to this in a car with like a subwoofer system or something, I want that solid feeling on the seat. You know what I mean? Just a solid, I want to be supported by that bass. And we don't got any of that going on with the DI. So let's start we're going to start with a default. I'm going to try to make it kind of as naked as possible. Okay, so first things first, gates on bass, I don't really like them that much. With bass, you kind of have to, if you've got like excess string vibrations or whatever that you're not controlling with your hands, trying to gate it out's not really going to do much, because that's going to be a problem as you're playing, not just between sections. So generally, I don't really fuck with gates. On a recording, if I've got like a long fade out or whatever, I'll cut some parts out if need be, but I don't gate bass very much at all. There's a tuner, EQ, that's at the end, so we're gonna worry about that afterwards. So knowing that the bass has the multiple roles that it's playing, it's got the foundation, and then it's got its more expressive top end or whatever. If we can separate the top and bottom into their respective roles that they play in the mix, we can have our cake and eat it too. And that's what's cool with Seismic, is that it does this internally. So we don't have to set up like an extra track and, you know, high pass and low pass and all that fancy stuff. It's just happening right in the plugin. So before I start digging in on these, the knob diddling and all that fun stuff, I want to preface this with my general approach to getting tones is I'm just fucking with knobs. And when I hear something I like, I keep that change. If I don't like it, I reverse it, that sort of thing. And I know that doesn't really help, so I'm going to go a little bit further into detail, but that is generally my thing. It's experimentation. But if I were to have a formula, this is basically it. We're going to start dialing in a tone from this DI. So first things first, we need to establish what is wrong. Like, where are we? Where are we going? What do we need to do to get there? Typically, I'm just kind of turning knobs, and then like instinctually, if I'm getting closer to where I want to go, then I will leave that change or whatever. If it takes me further away from where I want to go, I'll reverse that change. So in my example, when I compare my bass to my target, the main thing I'm hearing at the moment is that lack of solid bottom end. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff going on, but I'm prioritizing that bottom end because that is the job of the bass guitar, is to provide a foundation for the entire mix. Like, it can do whatever the fuck it wants afterwards, but you're at least going to do that. That's the job of the bass guitar. Yeah, so right now it's like, dude, yeah, I need a solid bottom end. It's just too dynamic down there. I want to reduce the dynamic range for two reasons. One is for that consistency that I'm looking for. I want like a consistent bottom end, consistent level. But also, if I decide that I want to distort this signal, and it's totally a matter of preference. I have found in my personal experience that I like a more consistent signal, and more dynamically consistent signal feeding into a distortion circuit, because I just feel like it distorts a little bit more evenly, because the distortion is going to react to the amplitude of the signal. And if it's kind of overly dynamic, then the saturation level of that distortion is going to kind of change along with the amplitude of the signal. So by squeezing that signal a little bit before the distortion, that kind of helps me get a little bit more even saturation level. So if I want like a certain kind of grind, and I want that grind to be kind of somewhat consistent, I can kind of get that by compressing it a little bit, and then that saves me from having to use too much distortion later. And that might not be something you want all the time, because sometimes you might want that the distortion to be a little bit more reactive. So it's a matter of preference and like this situation. In this case, I'm going to squeeze it a little bit. So I'm hearing a little bit more compression than I'd really like to hear. So I'm going to turn the compression or the ratio down. All right, this is feeling pretty cool here for me, but like basically what I'm hearing is on some of those like harder notes, like I'm trying to play really consistently, but you know, it is a tricky thing. Real quick, with compression, a lot of times you can just use the gain reduction meter to kind of, you know, it's not a really good idea to mix with your eyes at any point, but this can kind of help you find kind of a sweet spot. So what I'm after, like, I don't want to compress so much that I can really like hear it. Like when I first turn this on, you can hear a little bit of it like kind of crunching up a little bit too much. And that's when I backed off the ratio and turned the blend down a bit to bring in some of the dry signal. But basically, if you watch the meter, and this is for any compressor, you can kind of tell how much you are compressing. And typically, I will try to get it to where the softer notes in a given run, like, and I'm talking about like unintentional dynamics here. If those kind of unintentionally softer notes are just kind of barely getting compressed, and then the hardest ones are not getting too compressed, you know, I'm trying to find that balance point. where, you know, everything's getting squeezed just a little bit. We're pretty much there. I'm gonna turn the blend down a little bit more. Let's dig into the amp. Okay, so right away I'm like, that's not gonna work, and I already know that that's just the mid range is just too gainy and a little bit too loud right now. I'm also thinking this might not be the right amp model. Let's try amp 2. Amp 1. Oh, it's this one. We've still got too much gain on the top. Okay, so at this point I'm listening for breakup now that we've got some distortion and some grit. Okay, so that's a good point for now. Obviously we're not to our tone yet, but this kind of gets rid of that scratchy stuff that was just kind of a little bit distracting. Now we're kind of back into bass tone territory, or, you know, kind of closer to a target territory now. But that bottom end, man, I want that more solid. I think we're gonna use a different amp for the bottom end. Let's try a few different ones real quick. This one's feeling the best to me. It feels like kind of like the cleanest and the most like solid. Amp 3 was feeling a bit. That's just a little bit too dirty for the bottom end for me. But I've also got this gain turned up pretty high, so let's play with this a bit. Okay, right there, you can kind of hear the bottom end just kind of dropping out a little bit right there when I turn this gain down. And you can feel it. It almost feels like a, I'm not using the sub pack. I'm just saying feels a different sort of way, but it feels like almost like a nice warm blanket. Like if you imagine yourself like you're just kind of floating in space, and then you're like, man, I wish I had something to like stand on or whatever. I'm kind of just out here floating and stuff. And then you got this nice like thick like cloud or something. It's like a blanket sort of thing. It's just kind of coming up and supporting you in this like nice comfortable chair like shape or something. You can almost like it's kind of just supporting. It's hard to think of an analogy, but it's like a nice supportive warm cloud. See, now it's starting to get kind of a little bit blown out a little bit. I'm just like, a little too much. Let's check our reference. Getting closer. I'm going to bring in some compression here because I still want that to be a little bit more solid. And granted, I have to pay attention to when those higher notes are coming in. I'm going to lose some bottom end just because those notes are, you know, it's physics. I can't argue with physics. I mean, I can counteract physics a little bit with these fancy toys, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, one trick with, you know, try not to mix with my eyes. It's never a good idea. You want to try to, if you're using your eyes, try to verify that you're hearing what you're seeing. Because, especially with the bottom end, like the bottom end on like meters and analyzers and stuff are typically not super accurate. So you just kind of want to use it as like a guide rail sort of thing. Like when you're driving and you've got, you know, the stripes that are painted on the roads, those are guide points. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that there's not going to be like a car stopped in the middle of the road. You still have to pay attention. You know what I mean? But generally, you want to stay between those lines. And that's kind of what I'm using this reduction meter thing for. I don't. I want it to kind of dance around not doing anything on like the softer notes. And then when the harder notes are coming in, obviously those are going to get ducked. So that's sounding pretty good to me. Another trick with this, if you're working on bottom end and you've got monitors, I'm using headphones at the moment because I have this microphone that is live. But if you just touch, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, probably I think it was the post effects video that I did. So if you want to actually see a video of it, but if you just touch the surround on your speaker, just lightly, just, barely touch it, you can feel like the bottom end usually a bit better than you can hear it. So that's a good trick when you're working with this stuff, especially if you're trying to balance the kick bottom end with the bass bottom end. You can usually feel the thump of the kick coming through the speakers. With headphones, a little bit trickier. You just have to use your ears. I'm going to change this crossover. And that's not, you can pretty much leave that however you want, but typically for me, like the 150 range is kind of like not really a dead zone, but I don't find a lot of useful information there for most of the mixes that I've done. So typically I find that to be a fairly safe place where I like to put crossovers typically on bass. But that also just might be, the tuning I'm in and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different factors. But the way that they set this to begin with it's a pretty good spot, which should be fine. You shouldn't really need to mess with it too much. It's more like me being nitpicky. Okay, so we have used kind of a combination of different dynamics controls to kind of pin that bottom end a bit and get it to not move around so much. We started with this compressor and the pre-effects to put a bit of squeeze on it. And then going into this amplifier section on just the bottom end, we've got some gain, which is, we got a little bit of a distortion here. So that's kind of reducing the dynamics a little bit through saturation. And then we've got some compression happening there also. So there's nothing really fancy going on here. I'm just listening for the character of the amp, and then I've got this gain knob to kind of give me more of that. Basically, it's going to saturate a little bit as I get higher up there. And a good way to think of saturation is just more. Like you want more of it, but not volume. You just want more. So you can think of it like somebody squishing their face against glass. Maybe it's not perfectly transparent glass, so like you're only really seeing the stuff that's actually touching the glass. And then as they squish more of their face into it, you kind of see a little bit more of it because more of it is in contact with that glass. That's kind of how I picture saturation. You're just getting, the face isn't getting closer to you like it would be if it's louder, but you're seeing or hearing more of it. And it will kind of alter the tonal character as you saturate, because whatever that kind of EQ curve is that you're feeding into that saturation, it's getting kind of crunched up. And if you've got like a peak, say at a certain frequency range, you're going to get more of that because that's kind of saturating first as you turn this up. Like maybe I want some more grind. Well, let's bring up this guy again. So there we go. Now we got a more of a overdrive kind of distorted thing. What if we want to go, you know, way more ballsy? Then we can come back over here, and this might alter our bottom end, so we got to be careful. Anything we go back before the amp with, we're coming back to the pre section. This is going to kind of alter things, so we got to be careful. Yeah, so we're getting a little bit, we've definitely got more of that grind going on. I feel like I'm losing a little bit of bottom end. And I don't really like the scratchiness of this, which that could be an interplay between this distortion on this pedal and these. So let's try turning these, you know, down. We're going to lean on this distortion a little bit more. Cool. And this is also going to reduce the dynamic range a little bit more, since we're kind of crunching up into that saturation point in the pedal here. So that's going to affect how much of the dynamics control that we need to exert on all of these. So your low mids is just pinpoints where this knob is going to do its business. So right now it's at 250 hertz. We could boost or cut. Cutting around that range can kind of make things sound bigger. Like, and that's kind of true for a lot of stuff, but you don't want to completely neuter that because it's a really important range, but you can kind of see that scoop kind of just, it makes it sound pretty big. But the trouble with that is if you cut too much of that in a mix situation, it'll make the bass sound kind of like, you know, thin. So we're gonna turn this up for this part. So we're getting closer. This becomes super handy. This is what I was talking about earlier. The whole like, I can't hear the bass, or turn up the bass or turn down the bass. That doesn't really exist in a mix engineer's, you know, that's not a thing. Like when somebody gives us a note like, can you turn up the bass? It's like, well, what part of the bass? Do you want to like hear it more or do you want to feel it more? Because this is a good way to like hear the bass more without fucking up that bottom end. Like if you got the bottom end locked in, you don't want to fuck with that anymore. So you see how much like louder the bass got? I just boosted 750 hertz. That's all I did. All right, so right here, this is a good way to demonstrate that thing I was talking about earlier about like your saturation consistency. With a lower compression, if you listen to just like the saturation or the distortion by itself, that kind of the grindiness, you can kind of hear it kind of fluctuating a little bit. I'll turn this off, you'll hear it more. You can kind of hear some of the notes are kind of clean, like especially kind of the higher ones, they'll kind of clean up a little bit, and then it gets lower, and then you'll hear a bit more distortion. That's just because that's louder. There's more signal going through, so the distortion circuit's going to kind of interpret that as volume, and it's going to distort that a little bit harder. By squeezing the signal before it hits the distortion, we're giving that distortion circuit more of an even signal, so it's kind of distorting things a little bit more evenly. You should be able to hear that here. If I turn this up, it'll kind of push all of the notes up further into that distortion saturation zone. And then obviously if you turn up the drive, that's going to do a similar thing, but just without the crunch. We're just turning up the volume before the distortion circuit, so it equals more distortion. You're driving the signal into that distortion circuit. This is all about gain staging. I try not to get too nerdy with gain staging because I think people kind of just think of it as one thing that happens in mix prep, but it's like at all stages you're dealing with gain staging. And it's just a lot more simple than, people, it's not really a process. It's just a thing to keep in mind. And all it is literally what it sounds like. You're staging different gain points. There's optimal ways to feed each point of the chain as far as like, where you're able to change volumes. Like certain units will want a specific volume of input signal. So you're just kind of optimizing that at every point in the chain. And when I say optimize, I just mean whatever your preferences happen to be for that particular use. Like in this point, or in this instance, I'm trying to even out that saturation level a little bit without just relying on turning the fucking volume up. So I'm squeezing it with a compressor and then I'm turning it up. So if you listen to the higher notes there, if I try to use just the drive knob to get that saturation more consistent, it just doesn't, it's still dropping out a little bit. But if I squeeze it a little bit and then boost it going into here, the saturation's a little bit more consistent, and I prefer it that way. All right, so I'm digging this so far. And the rest of this just basically comes down to taste. We're going to want the cab section more than likely, so let's start fucking with that next. And we may even, we might want that, we might not. We're going to switch the blend all the way to 1 cabinet for now. I turned the level down because it sounded like it was a little bit farty. Sorry for not really explaining what I'm doing here. I'm just trying out different things. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't like it, I try something else. I'm trying different flavors of like the top end for articulation. Compare it to no cabinet. So obviously it's scooping out a bunch of the mid-range, but we're getting into the territory where we can't go much further without putting it in context with the mix. So I am going to bring in the rest of the mix. Yeah, I'm not liking what I've got going on at the top end, really. Back to the U47. Might just be this. Let's go back to 52. So that bottom end is still kind of feeling a little bit wobbly. I'm coming back to this compressor. And this is where I try to ignore what I'm looking at because I don't like how the gain reduction meter looks, but I'm liking how it sounds better, so fuck what it looks like. We're in the ballpark now. I'm just going to start trying some of these extra options because I have not really touched any of these other things yet. Oh, another thing, you have to be careful about the the tendency to prefer anything that's louder, because we're working on the bass. If we make something that makes the bass louder, we're gonna fool ourselves and be like, "Ooh, that sounds good." But you just kind of have to keep that in mind, that you're prone to playing tricks on yourself. So, like, initially I'm turning this up, I'm like, "Ooh, that's cool," but it's also making the bass way too loud. I'm gonna go without it. Don't need that. Let's actually turn this down. I'm gonna leave that off. I do like that. That makes things quite a bit girthier, it feels like. But it might not be super cool on all those higher notes, because sometimes that can get a little bit weird. Yeah, I'm gonna go without it. This is gonna be a little bit more throatier kind of tone, I guess. So this Quake Knob is like Waves R bass or Waves Max bass. It's adding some sub harmonics. I believe it's like not really like actual sub information. It's like the harmonics that would be like further up in the frequency spectrum, but it kind of gives the illusion of a bigger bottom end. So like if your mix is being played back on smaller speakers, or like a phone, this could be helpful to kind of make the bass feel a little bit bigger, even though that tiny speaker can't actually reproduce the bottom end of the bass. So you might hear it as like almost like a low mid-range sort of bump. And I believe that's kind of where the magic is happening on those Waves plugin. And this Enhance knob is different EQ curves from a Avalon mic preamp that they were using in the development of this plugin, I believe. All right, so at this point, it's just basically a matter of taste, and you're just kind of like, messing around. Like right now, I'm feeling like I've got just too much low mids, and I can kind of come back into the pre section, and I can scoop a bit of that out. Maybe I want less 250, but I've already got a setting here, so that's going to alter things. Let's see what happens. I'm at negative 2.58. Yeah, that's not really getting it for me. So we've got these other options. I could either use this, or in the post effects, we've got this 10 band EQ with a little bit finer control here. All right, so now that we're in the mix, I'm like, man, I want a little bit more, I want to hear the bass a little bit more. So we can come back to this distortion pedal. We've got the 750 thing here, like we were talking about earlier. So you can kind of see how that brought in the definition a little bit more. Now it's basically just the foundation. And we can do more of that here. We're gonna need some 1K. 2K is kind of like the center for like harshness a lot of times, so you want to be careful with 2K, but it's also a good frequency for definition. But if you need a little bit more definition, you can bump that up a scotch. So that's basically it. I would keep going with this, but I'm not going to be doing anything different than what I'm already doing. So, okay, here's a preset I like, but I kind of want to do a variation of it or whatever. Let's do a save as. So here are some presets I made before. We're going to call this Tone Dial Demo 1. And then we're like, hey, let's get that cleaner version. So then we come over here, turn the compressor back to 4:1. I turn the distortion off, but I'm working faster than I can speak, so sometimes I get all fucked up. Let's bring in like a cleaner. It's already on amp 1. Oh, let's do DI. Let's see what we can get out of that. Okay, so now we got a way different bass tone. The bottom end is still roughly in that same spot because I didn't really touch it very much other than adding this contour thing. So I guess I kind of did, but. I'm digging that. All right, so then you've got your other tonal variation, and then you go to Save As, Trial Demo, Tone Dial Demo 2, boom. And then that can be handy. Obviously, those are two wildly different presets, but if you get one that you're happy with and you're like, save it, then make your little tweaks, and then, make your different versions. And if you switch back between them, you just pick your favorite. And then you've got all the other ones later if you want them, but that can help you progress without just kind of spinning your wheels. Okay, so a quick and dirty mixing thing. So, because this is all relative, we start with the bass, and then we go all the way to mixing, because this is all important. This isn't just about turning some knobs. So one thing I like to focus on first is just getting the bottom end locked in. And we can start by getting the bass, whatever tone we're going to use. Okay, we're going to use that. And we're going to solo the bass and look at the meters for the main outs, so your master bus or whatever. Way too loud. I'm going to get a bigger meter going on. So this is the peak level is the top here, and the RMS is here. So that's like the average, root mean squared, whatever. Basically like the average level of the volume there. So the reason we're soloing it is because we want the bass to be hitting that at roughly negative 18 dBFS, decibels full scale. And we're at like 11. So we're going to bring that down. I'm going to do it right here. You can see how it kind of changes a bit depending on the notes. You're not going to be able to totally smash that out of it. You'd have to way overcompress it to totally get that perfect. That's what I mean about noodly bass players. If they're noodling all the time, there's nobody playing bass. Okay, so that's a pretty good spot. I'm going to leave that right there. The reason I did that with this output knob rather than the fader is so that I can just leave the fader at 0. And that gives me a little bit better control if I need it. So I'm just trying to set that at a good spot. And then for the mix, try to just lock that in and don't touch it. If you go like, oh man, the bass isn't loud enough or too loud, and then you change it, you're going to lose that benchmark. And that's basically all we're trying to establish is like, now that we've got the bass kind of compressed and sitting kind of roughly how we want it dynamically, we can use that as like a solid reference point, and we can build everything else around it. And the reason why we're picking that random number, seemingly random number of negative 18 decibels full scale, dBFS, that gives us ample headroom. So like if a lot of other things are going to be like louder than the bass. So by tucking that down, it gives us enough room for all of those peaks and everything. And then we're going to start building things around it. I'm going to start with the kick. It doesn't have to be soloed, but you know, that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. And what I'm listening for, and this is where that speaker trick comes in handy, just lightly touching the speakers. Or if you have a sub pack, you know, it's basically a way to feel the, feel the bottom end of the mix if you can't accurately hear it, if you're on headphones or whatever. It's a matter of taste, but I like the kick to be kind of like punching through the bass. So like the bass has kind of got like a roughly steady level, and the kick drum, is kind of punching up through that. So if you hear just the bottom end, okay, so this is mostly a matter of preference, but for me, I want a thick, solid bass, but I also want a nice, thumpy kick. A lot of mixers will kind of, try to specify like, having the kick live at a higher, like the fundamental of the kick living at a higher fundamental frequency than the fundamental of the bass, or vice versa, but not having them like on top of each other. And that totally makes sense. And I totally, I agree with that in principle, but I almost always prefer the thump of the kick to be like the absolute lowest main part, other than like 808s and subs and all that. The kick fundamental is like the thump that happens below everything else. And I'm okay with it kind of overlapping with the bass a little bit. For me, it's a lot more of I kind of want them to blend a little bit. I don't want perfect definition between I want them to kind of mix together in a nice way. If they're too separated, it just sounds kind of disconnected to me. So I kind of want a little bit of overlap. And I'm just trying to get that thump of the kick to kind of just, you know, I want to be able to feel the kick. So the bass is making that nice, comfy cloud that we're kind of sitting on. And then the kick is like a big old Godzilla or something. And he's kind of like hitting the bottom of the cloud with like a baseball bat or something. And it's, you know, kind of a thump. And we're like, ooh, that's what I'm looking for. So then once we have that bottom end locked in, I'm just using Crim drums as like a kind of a quickie thing. Normally I'd have this broken out into way more stuff so I could show you more mixing things. But generally the kick also has its two different roles. So it's got that thump that I was talking about. That's kind of like the main purpose of the kick for me. And then the top end is kind of separately. So I'll try to treat those as two different things. So we've got the thump of the kick and then the attack. And the attack is more like a matter of taste, but the thump is non-negotiable. It's got to hit just right. And that's, you know, it's playing with the bottom end of the bass. If I can split the kick signal up, like just like how I did with the bass, and treat it like the bottom end thump separately from the top end attack, it makes things a lot easier because I can lock in the bottom end of the kick and the bottom end of the bass. And once I have those locked in, I don't have to touch them. Unless I do something where like I need to go back and readjust things, I can lock that in and then just adjust the top end of both the bass and the kick, you know, to taste and to kind of blend it with the guitars and cymbals and all that other stuff. So that's the gist here. We're trying to lock in a solid level for the bass, that -18 dBFS, then bring in the kick to kind of punch through that. And then we've got our bottom end kind of locked in. And as long as we don't like fuck that up, just kind of leave that intact, we can fine tune the upper end of each of the instruments to taste. And it's kind of, the guitars aren't quite as much of a deal with this because they don't live down in that bass region, or in my opinion, they shouldn't. I usually high pass guitars so that there's nothing but the kick and bass down there unless there's an 808 or something. And that just gives me a good starting point for the mix. Okay, so hopefully all of this made sense. This was an unscripted thing. My friend texted me about this idea last night. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do that real quick. And this was just kind of a last minute thing. So hopefully this helps some people. I'm pretty sure he was just wanting, like, you know, show me how to use that plugin. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where I can show you what the knobs do, but that's not really gonna, I don't think that's gonna be helpful. It's more, if you're curious about this plugin, you need to download the trial and try it. But if you're like curious about like, how do I dial it in? The shitty answer is just like you would anything else, but with, you know, the options that they give you. So that's why this is a bit long-winded. I apologize, but everything needs context. I hate when there's YouTube videos where it's just like they show you a tiny little section of something, but there's no context. So it's like you're just trying to memorize steps, and that is not helpful in my opinion at all. If I can show you why I'm doing things and like my goals, I feel like that's more helpful. And I hope that I was able to convey like the thought processes rather than, you know, just do this, because the steps don't matter nearly as much as like your understanding of the concepts for why you're doing certain things. And the best way to learn that is just to start turning knobs and, you know, listening. Use a reference so you can, you know, if you're getting closer or further from your target. And yeah, I hope that was helpful. Oh, also, if you want to save money, if you want to buy this plugin or anything else on the Modern Metal Songwriter web store thingy, you can use code Fender25, and that'll save you some cash. So go buy stuff. All right, later.